If you're running a business and you're doing marketing, you gotta watch this video, but it's not what you think. I'm not here to sell you some fancy AI, get 5 trillion leads in the next 17 seconds for free. I'm not really interested in that. I like to spend my time on the things that don't change. Now, there is one strategy above all the others that if you don't lean into it, it will eventually burn down your entire marketing plan. It's just a matter of time. But I got good news for you. It's pretty cheap to run. It's not that complicated, and your customers are gonna do most of the work for you. The next few minutes, I'm gonna teach you exactly how it works. So I can tell you the exact weekend in 2019 when I figured out how powerful this was. I was running my first company, UpLaunch, and we went to a conference in Chicago. There were about 10 different speakers that were all, rotating through the stage, sharing their strategies on business growth, and we showed up as one of the event sponsors. Honestly, I was super nervous. The business was super young. We didn't have a ton of cash, and I wasn't sure we were gonna see any ROI from the investment on sponsoring the event. So we go do this thing anyway, right? And the first speaker jumps up on stage and starts talking about marketing tactics for gyms, because that's who our customers were. And a funny thing happens. He's about halfway through his talk, and he mentions how he uses our product to run the strategy in his own gym. It's cool, little shout out, didn't think too much of it. Awesome, got a little attention, felt good about it. Second speaker gets up. Same thing happens on a totally different topic. Third speaker gets up. You guess it, same thing. And by the second day, so many people from the stage had mentioned our product that it literally became a joke. They would mention our company's name and the whole audience would start laughing because every single speaker at this entire event was using our product to power the strategies they were teaching from the stage. So here was the opportunity. 100% of the speakers were using our software, but only 40% of the attendees were using our software. We knew that because we asked them to put their hands up. Point being, our little sponsor booth was no longer enough, so we ran a hurry up offense. We rented a conference room in this hotel, got the team together, started doing group demos on breaks in between sessions. Like, we physically had to create a way to take a credit card in person because we'd never done it before. We're doing all our sales over the internet to figure all this stuff out. And long story short, by the time we flew home from Chicago, that weekend was the most profitable 2-day period in the entire history of our company, right up through the day that we sold. Now, it wasn't because we released some new feature. It wasn't because our software was the most incredible thing that had ever been invented. And it sure as hell wasn't because our in-person demos we'd never done before were any good at all. It was because of one key principle. Your customers don't give a shit about you. They don't want to hear from you at all. They want to hear from people like them. If you build a business that can produce social proof on demand, case studies, testimonials, reviews, podcast episodes, videos, all that stuff, you will absolutely destroy your competitors who are still focused on trying to be the loudest voice in the room, chucking money at Facebook ads and posting on Instagram. I focused like a maniac on getting really good at this one skill, and now I'm going to teach you exactly how to do it. So the key framework here that I want to teach you guys is called the Win Ask Loop. If you've read my book, Software as a Science, we cover this in depth in chapter 8. We'll put a link to it down in the show notes. But I'm going to walk through this today, right? Because you got one mission, one single mission, right? And it's to turn your customers over here on the left into advocates. What the hell is an advocate? I will tell you. An advocate, the way I define it here, is somebody who is going to sing your praises from the rooftops, right? Someone who's going to get online and on Reddit and, in testimonials, G2 Crowd, Capterra, wherever people talk about your thing. And they're going to always talk about how great your solution is compared to everything else out there. A raving fan, somebody who loves you. That is an advocate, and that's what we're in the business of building here. So this is a multi-step process, all right? It doesn't have to just have 3 steps. That's just what I'm going to draw out here. But the key point I'm trying to get you to understand is that each time we run this loop, and that's why I call a loop, right, is because it keeps going and going and going. Each time we do this, we're going to make a bigger ask and get a more important, more impactful piece of social proof. But you can't just spend all your time asking people for shit, because eventually they're going to get tired of it and they're going to feel taken advantage of, and they're not going to do it. So I will tell you the most important thing about this. It's not the email you send, it's not the words that you use, it is the timing. Timing is everything. We call it the win-ask loop for a very specific reason. When your customers win, then you make the ask. All right, when your customers win again and win again, you get the idea. Then you make the ask and you make the ask. Every time your customers win, using your product, using your service, consuming something from your business, when they get a beautiful result, that's when you come in and make the ask. I'm going to give you a few examples here. So think about this in the context of a customer journey, right? So they're over here, they become your customer, they buy something, and let's say they're with you for a couple years. When they first experience what I like to call first value, right, which is that first light bulb aha moment from the time they become your customer, they finally get the payoff, the thing that you promised them in the sales process. When they get that first value, that is the first time that you make the ask. And we try to keep this to a relatively small time investment, something like a review, right, or a quick written testimonial, something that's like 5 to 10 minutes in length. You're not trying to get these guys come speak at your customer conference just because they got one bit of value, which basically means that your product or service did what the hell you said it would do in the first place. But you can at least ask them for something small right here. All right, then we keep going. And when they have what I consider a big win. For B2B, it's usually some kind of major financial outcome in the business that your product or service contributed to. When they have a big win, then you can start to make a bigger ask. This is stuff like doing a podcast episode or doing a video testimonial, right? Like something real that might take some time, a case study, but it's worth it to the customer because they had a big win that they want to share with the world. We can keep going from here, right? I mean, you have a couple of big wins. Eventually, you and your business from the customer standpoint are going to turn into something totally different. I like to call this the transformation. So when you have a transformation level event, for instance, in SaaS Academy, when I was running that company, our transformation level event was when one of our clients sold their company, right? When you have that big outcome for a customer, that's when you can make a much bigger ask, right? And this is stuff like flying them to your customer conference, putting them on stage, having them be a reference account where other customers who are in the sales process can reach out to them and get a reference. These are the big asks that require a lot of time, but those customers, because they won big with you, will be more than willing to do it. So this is the big idea, the win-ask loop. They win, you ask over and over again, and each win gets bigger, each ask gets a little bit more intense, bigger, more intense, bigger, more intense. And before you know it, if you run this play for a year or more, you are gonna have stacks of social proof. And in the next few minutes, as we wrap this up, I'm gonna give you some very specific, very tactical implementation steps to make sure that you execute this as thoroughly as possible. Tip number 1, seed the request. Anytime that I sell something to someone, I tell them in the sales process that when it works, I'm gonna ask them for a review. I'm gonna ask them for a case study. I'm gonna ask them for a testimonial. I just tell them up front, and it actually does 2 things. Number 1 is it makes sure that they don't feel surprised when you ask them for a testimonial, just like you said you would do. And number 2, it also helps project confidence in the sales process because you're basically saying, look, you might not be 100% sure this thing's gonna work, but I'm 100% sure it's gonna work. Let's go on this journey together, and when it works, just like I said it would, all I'm asking is that you help me share this with the world. Is that crazy, or can you do that? And 9 times out of 10, it's not gonna be an issue. Tip number 2, you gotta measure the wins. And this feels crazy not to do. When I say it on this video, it will feel completely obvious. Yet if you think about your business, I would also be willing to bet that you've got some opportunity to do this a little bit better. Long story short, you've got to know the moment when your customer wins. Right? If you're running ads, right, running an agency, that's an easier one. You can see when the ads are performing well and when they're making money. But are you actually tracking it and figuring out a threshold of what you consider a win and then taking the ask on the back end of that happening? Maybe, maybe not. Right? In software, you can see how people are using the software, you can see how the results are coming in, but do you have specific thresholds that trigger your customer team to take some actions? Maybe, maybe not. You can't run this play if you're not measuring the wins. And so if you're not really clear on A, what winning actually looks like for your customers, and B, how the hell you're gonna measure it in the first place, that is the pre-work. Before you can run this on autopilot, on repeat, over and over again, you gotta get good at measuring the wins for every single customer you have. Tip number 3, automate the ask. This is super important because you don't want to go through all this effort to start measuring these wins and then realize that every time a customer wins, it just creates more work for you, and then it goes on your little to-do list, and then you freaking ignore it and still don't run the process. Automate the ask. I'm going to give you a very specific example of how this can work. In my first company, UpLaunch, the same one I was telling you about earlier, we had an automation where we would send out a quarterly net promoter score. That's those little surveys you get as a customer when you're like, hey, on 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend us to a friend? Anybody anybody who responded as a 9 or a 10, that's called a promoter in NPS land, anyone who was a promoter, we would automatically trigger through Zapier a workflow that would email intro them to someone on my team named Hillary, who was really good at writing case studies. So as soon as they clicked 9 or 10, they would get an email intro from me to Hillary, automatically introducing them, and then Hillary would pick it up, reply, get something scheduled, and create the case study. But it took me completely out of the equation because I knew that if all of a sudden I had this little win that I was measuring, and then I had this notification and I had to go do all this manual work every single time, I promise you I'm going to mess it up and I will be the problem. So instead, just automate the ask so you can start the process working without a human being having to touch it, and you will realize that it works 100 times better. Tip number 4, focus on distribution. This is a funny one. Human beings, they love a few things. They generally love money, they love saving time, but they also, above all else, love status. So if you're producing content, featuring your customers, telling their stories, talking about how awesome they are and how much they win, don't just create it and stick it on your website and ignore it. Focus on distribution. Send it out far and wide. Post it on social. Use it in your ads. Use it on your demo booking page. Use it on the landing page of your website. Put it freaking everywhere. But most importantly, send it back to the customer. Not by itself in a little email saying, look how cute you look on camera, but show it to them in the wild. Distribute it, and then take the ad, take the page, take the website copy, and send that to the customer so they can authentically see how you're using their story in real life to give both of you an elevated status in the market. Tip number 5, do not ignore this one. Do this on repeat. Doing this once or twice is really seductive. It makes you feel like you're doing a good job. You might not automate the ask, maybe you're not figuring out how to measure wins all the time. You just like log in and pull some numbers and find a couple customers who are doing okay and manually email them. That is not this. That is a one-time effort for a one-time outcome. What I'm talking about here is building an ongoing, repeatable system that works forever. Run this on repeat, guys, and not just on repeat for your entire customer base, but for each customer. Remember the model I drew for you on the iPad. There were multiple wins in the chain, right? So don't just do it for one thing. That NPS example I gave you, that wasn't the only thing we had triggered. We had 4 or 5 different wins that would trigger different levels of asks as customers went through the journey. That's the whole point. By doing it on repeat, we do it for all the customers that we serve multiple times per customer. The more they win, the more we get to ask. You gotta build a system here. Now, I'm a big fan of taking immediate action. So if you've made it this far in the video and you're putting this in play, feel free, just head over to my Instagram. It's @MattVerlak. Send me a DM. And if you got any questions about how this works, I'm gonna take a look at what you're doing, or something in here didn't make sense, just shoot me a DM, ask me the question. I answer all of them personally, and I would love to chat with you. Other than that, have an awesome day. See you.